I've really enjoyed so far. So thank you to everybody in the participation. Absolutely fascinating. So I'm writing up my thesis at the moment, which is quite interesting in a time of COVID-19, because you obviously can't ignore it, especially when I'm thinking about health. So I need to acknowledge my 3 PhD supervisors who are on the slide there. I should also state in another hat, I'm the Honorary Director of Research with Healthy Stadia, but my PhD is at the University of Glasgow, the School of Social and Political Sciences, and the title of what I'm talking about is Whose Ethics? Unhealthy Sponsorship and Marketing in the English Premier League, Interviews with Key Informants in Football. This is obviously about the UK, but it's also worth pointing out, as has been said before, the Premier, as Peter Drury right at the start, I think, actually said that the Premier League is the richest football league in the world. It is seen globally. In fact, the biggest audience numerically is not in the UK, it's probably in Asia. So we need to be aware of the impact of the marketing within the Premier League. And I was just intrigued that on the 30th of April, The Guardian ran this headline: Premier League clubs set for summit with health versus money, top of the agenda. I mean, I've never seen a heading like that. Why does it take a pandemic for a discussion to take place about money and health in football? So it's worth pointing out, and a lot of people, sadly, as we all know, we are in the middle of a pandemic, a lot of people losing their lives. However, overall, there will be more people dying this year from non-communicable diseases. And it's worth keeping that in mind, that these diseases are here year to year, and they're caused by physical inactivity, alcohol abuse, tobacco, unhealthy diet, and they're manifested in cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. And we're also quite well aware that emerging evidence shows that all these risk factors also increase an individual's risk of death in their response to coronavirus. We're also aware that the Premier League is full of what I'm defining as unhealthy commodity industries with sponsorship. So, and just to define unhealthy commodities for this research, I'm talking about gambling. That isn't non-communicable diseases, but it does have a huge impact upon mental health, as we know. But I'm defining unhealthy commodities as gambling, food and beverages, which is high in fat, sugar and salt, and alcohol. If people want to read a little bit more about the background of what I'm defining commercial determinants of health, I've given a reference there, and please do come back to me at the end if you want to follow up on any of this. So this is a part of my research I'm talking about. I'm due to submit in October. I might make that. See how we get on. But this is 4 individual pieces of research. So it's a mixed method approach. I'm looking at club websites. I'm looking at television broadcasting. Fortunately, I was able to do that before the season closed down. I'm looking at brand activation. But what I'm specifically going to be talking about, it's the first time I've talked about this, so I'm really interested to hear any comments whatsoever on this. But interviews that I was fortunate enough listening to Connor before, I was lucky enough to be able to do these and completed them this time last year. So interviews with key informants concerning their views on commercial marketing practices in the English Premier League. 18 interviews conducted between January and May. Broadly speaking, I've defined them as representing these kind of areas. So 6 from clubs, 6 with a variety of commercial interests, 6 from fan groups of one kind or another, and 1 governing bodies and government. Semi-structured interviews, vast majority of them face-to-face. And I'm giving you an incredibly small insight into 18 transcripts, 14 hours, 11 minutes, and 325 pages. And I know. So that's the interview topic guide. I'm not going to go through this in any great detail as I won't have any time. Perhaps the first and third question I'll just highlight in a minute. What do you think about the type of sponsorship and advertising used in association with English Premier League clubs? And do you think there should be an ethical framework around the sponsorship and advertising used? I'm right in the middle of doing this, so this is not finished work, and this might change, but there are effectively 8 emerging themes. I'm not going to take any of those in black. I'm just going to look at the ones I've highlighted in red: ethics, promoting health, and responsibility and regulation. I've got a slide on each of these. Now, these are busy. You're not going to be able to read it all, possibly, and I'm not going to try and read it all. But I've particularly highlighted, as you can see, the red to show there. But this was a key question. Everybody got asked this at different times, depending on how the interview was going. Should there be an ethical framework around sponsorship and advertising used in the Premier League? One commercial director of a Premiership club looked at me back in my eyes and said, whose ethics? Which is a fair question, which is why the title. At the moment, it doesn't appear to be anybody's ethics, actually. But I think, I need to just check, but everybody thought there should be some framework around the decision-making around sponsorship advertising. Currently, there isn't any. A comment from a fan here was that because supporters love their club to an entirely different level, not like a Tesco's or a Marks and Spencer, a completely different level. So their argument was the supporters are way more susceptible to following a marketing message. And this is the alternative view, and it's perfectly valid. So I'll read this in full. And so Cadbury and Coca-Cola, I can see why, a very nanny state view of the world would be, yes, we should ban it. Kids shouldn't be exposed to it. But there are legal businesses going about their business, selling products that, I consume, and therefore I don't have a problem with it being advertised and associated with sport. Interesting quotes, does football promote health? And of course, everybody thinks football promotes health and should promote health. But should there be more considerations around children? And a fan here said, and when I say a fan, generally I'm speaking about somebody from a fan organisation. So I'm not saying they're entirely representative of fans, but they're probably giving a broader sweep of views than simply their individual perspective. So they're saying the whole relationship between sport and health. On the one hand, we are saying that we need to encourage more kids to play sports, but if at the same time that sport is counteracting that, whether through sugary drinks or alcohol or mental health through gambling problems, then to some extent these things are working against each other, which is an interesting perspective. And at the moment, as Peter said in his opening discussion, we're seeing some of the problems around governance, both in English football and Scottish football, in fact. And whose responsibility is it? In fact, the whole thing about if and when Premier League restarts is completely fraught, because in effect within the Premier League there are 20 different commercial businesses all vying for the best deal which suits them. So I did speak to somebody in DCMS, Department of Culture, Media and Sport. He said, I can say he, should I? They said, it's ultimately football's responsibility. The government doesn't dictate. These are commercial businesses. We've not have been involved in the decisions for Sky Bet to sponsor the Football League. We won't be consulted on individual Premier League sponsors. It's for those clubs to kind of have those commercial decisions. Again, from a fan, the FA could lead by example, but it's between the leagues and the clubs, Premier League and the clubs, to affect change and consider the impact that their marketing sponsorship has on people, their community. So this is a discussion, as I put with a slide at the start, money versus health. And wonderful quote at the start. And is anybody really going to disagree with me at professional level? We have to say, generally speaking, morality in football is not a high priority. So obviously kids love sport. Sport is a massive part of the lives of kids across the UK, and it's where they derive a huge number of role models from. So when you think about the significant influence of sport in their lives, then you start to ask the question, well, is that influence promoting their health or detracting from it? And now I declare an interest in that. I'm a supporter of Norwich City Football Club. I won't buy the shirt that Tim Cookie is wearing there because we're sponsored by a gambling company, the same sponsor of Celtic, incidentally. But this was an interview that Ben Cansell, the Chief Operating Officer of Norwich City, gave in June 2019 before we promoted and discussing the deal with Alphabet. Sometimes a football club has to, or especially a commercial outfit within a football club, has to marry the self-finance situation of the football club and the requirement for funds at the highest level has to marry it against its values. We're quite conscious of the decision made and money came first, as we frankly usually expected to. There are some limitations to the research. No one from the Premier League or the Football Association accepted my invitation for an interview. However, of the 18 people I interviewed, what was quite interesting, everybody will probably aware, a lot of people who work in football or in the football business have had different roles. So I talked to people who, all ranges from the media, marketing companies, people in senior positions within clubs, somebody who'd been a director of a club in the Football League. So a huge knowledge and experience in the football industries, and of course, fans with very different perspectives. So I deliberately put up myself with a Bookie shirt at the end because I refused to buy my own club shirt, and that's a Finland national shirt. So I'd be delighted to have any questions now answered. You got my Twitter ID there, and you got my email. But thanks ever so much for giving me the opportunity again. Cheers, Lee.